Neo-Babylonian Mysterium of Marxism and the Dragon by Othniel Max Daves. Root causality of the Mysterium of the global deception.
Hermeticism and Gnosticism are two spiritual beliefs that differ significantly from traditional Judeo-Christian doctrines and perspectives. Both of these beliefs have their roots in ancient times and offer a unique perspective on the nature of reality and the divine. Hermeticism is a belief system that follows the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus, an ancient Egyptian philosopher who is believed to have written the Corpus Hermeticum. This ancient text discusses the idea of the unity of all things and the interconnectedness of the universe. Hermeticism embraces the idea that humans can achieve spiritual enlightenment through the pursuit of knowledge and wisdom. It differs from traditional Judeo-Christian beliefs because it treats all religions and spiritual practices as equally valid paths to enlightenment. Gnosticism, on the other hand, is a belief system that dates back to the early Christian era and emphasizes the pursuit of knowledge and the understanding of hidden wisdom. Gnostics believe that salvation comes from secret knowledge that can only be attained through direct revelation. This belief system emphasizes the importance of a direct relationship with the divine and the idea that the material world is an illusion. Gnostic teachings differ from traditional Judeo-Christian beliefs in that they reject the idea of a singular deity and view the universe as a complex system of hierarchies and powerful forces. Both Hermeticism and Gnosticism can be oppositional to traditional Judeo-Christian beliefs because they embrace a fundamentally different perspective on the nature of spirituality. Hermeticism emphasizes the unity and interconnectedness of all things, while Gnosticism focuses on the pursuit of secret knowledge and a direct relationship with the divine. These beliefs can clash with the traditionally held view that there is a singular divine presence that is accessible to all through faith. Additionally, both Hermeticism and Gnosticism offer unique perspectives on the nature of reality that differ significantly from traditional Judeo-Christian doctrines. For example, Hermeticism allows for the possibility of multiple paths to enlightenment and argues that there is no single right way to practice spirituality. Gnosticism, on the other hand, rejects the idea of a singular deity and sees the universe as a complex and mysterious system of powers. These beliefs can be seen as oppositional to the traditional view of a singular, all-knowing God who created the universe and guides human destiny. Hermeticism and Gnosticism offer unique perspectives on the nature of reality and spirituality that differ significantly from traditional Judeo-Christian doctrines and perspectives. These beliefs can be oppositional to the traditional view of a singular deity and offer alternative paths to enlightenment and salvation. While some may view these beliefs as incompatible with traditional religious frameworks, they nonetheless offer a rich and complex understanding of the nature of the divine and human spirituality. Hermeticism, Gnosticism, Marxism, and postmodern philosophy all share one commonality. They are all adversarial towards Judeo-Christian faith, beliefs, doctrines, and perspectives. While there are many aspects of these philosophical and ideological movements that differentiate them from each other, there is one thing that ties them together. They are all skeptical of the truth posited by Judeo-Christian theology and doctrine. First, let us look at Hermeticism. This philosophical movement is based on the belief that the universe is animated by a divine force, which is also present within each individual. Traditional Judeo-Christian belief posits that there is only one God who exists outside of us, and that humans are created in his image. In contrast, Hermeticism does not necessarily require a personal God and instead emphasizes the divinity of the self. For example, the belief that humans can achieve a state of oneness with divinity is not accepted by traditional Judeo-Christian belief systems. Next, we can consider Gnosticism, a belief system that claims to offer a secret knowledge that unlocks hidden spiritual insights. Gnostics believe that the Judeo-Christian God is an impostor, and that the true God lies beyond the material realm of this world. This belief in hidden knowledge and secret societies directly opposes the idea of a universal religious community as espoused by Judeo-Christian teachings. The Gnostic movement was considered heretical by Christian leaders, and as such it was persecuted by the Church. Marxism as an ideology denies the existence of God and regards religion as a form of oppression, which serves to maintain the status quo. Marxism emphasizes the importance of social class and the struggle for economic power. In contrast, Judeo-Christian belief systems emphasize the importance of salvation and eternal life. For Marxists, the idea of Judeo-Christian salvation is nothing but a fiction, a means of distracting people from the real problems they face. Thus, the Marxist worldview is in direct opposition to the religious worldview of Judeo-Christianity. Finally, postmodern philosophy is another philosophical movement that is adversarial towards Judeo-Christian faith. This philosophical movement tends to deny the existence of objective reality altogether, claiming that all knowledge is constructed and subjective. Postmodernism tends to reject traditional authority structures, including the authority of religious institutions. As such, postmodernism often places itself at odds with the traditional boundaries and frameworks that religious traditions, including Judeo-Christianity, have established. The four philosophical movements discussed above are all at odds with Judeo-Christian faith, beliefs, doctrines, and perspectives, even though they do not share many features in common. They differ in many ways. Some emphasize the self, some emphasize the importance of hidden knowledge, some emphasize class struggle, and some reject the existence of objective reality altogether. But they share the same opposition to Judeo-Christian belief systems, which rely on an objective reality, the authority of God, and the hope of salvation. Ultimately, it's up to individuals to decide where they fall on the spectrum between these belief systems and religious traditions. Throughout history, various religious and philosophical movements have emerged that have shaped the way we think about the world around us. Four such movements which have impacted society in different ways are Hermeticism, Gnosticism, Marxism, and postmodern philosophy. Each of these movements has its roots in ancient mystery religions and philosophies, which laid the foundation for their development. In this essay, we will explore the relationship between these four movements and their ancient origins. Hermeticism is a religious and philosophical tradition based on the writings attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, a legendary figure from ancient Egypt. Hermeticism has been likened to a form of esotericism, which seeks hidden knowledge about the universe and one's place in it. The roots of this movement can be traced back to ancient Egyptian and Greek philosophy, which emphasized the deification of nature and the search for spiritual knowledge. The Hermetica, a collection of texts attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, describe the natural and supernatural world as interconnected, with an underlying unity that can be accessed through spiritual understanding. Hermeticism also drew upon the ideas of the Neoplatonists, who believed that a divine spirit permeated the universe. Gnosticism is a religious and philosophical movement that emerged in the late 2nd century CE. Its central tenet is that there is a hidden knowledge or gnosis that can be attained through spiritual means, which leads to salvation from the material world. Gnosticism has its roots in ancient mystery religions, particularly the Greco-Roman mystery religions and the Egyptian mystery schools. These religions were based on the idea that there were hidden teachings accessible only to initiates, which brought them closer to the divine. Gnosticism also drew upon the ideas of the early Christian movements, which emphasized the importance of personal spiritual experiences in obtaining salvation. Marxism is a political and social movement that emerged in the 19th century. Its central tenet is that society is divided into classes that are in conflict with each other, with the ruling class exploiting and oppressing the working class. Marxism has its roots in the social and economic theories of ancient philosophers like Plato and Aristotle, who also believed that society was structured hierarchically. However, Marxist philosophy owes its greatest debt to the Enlightenment thinkers, who emphasized the importance of reason and empirical evidence in understanding the world. Finally, postmodern philosophy is a more recent movement that emerged in the mid-20th century. Its central tenet is that there are no absolute or universal truths, and that all knowledge is subjective and contingent on cultural and historical context. Postmodern philosophy has its roots in the skepticism of ancient Greek philosophy, particularly the sophists, who believed that knowledge was relative to the individual. It also drew upon the ideas of the existentialists, who emphasized the importance of subjective experience in understanding the world. Hermeticism, Gnosticism, Marxism, and postmodern philosophy all have their roots in ancient mystery religions and philosophies. These movements share a common emphasis on hidden knowledge, the importance of personal spiritual experience, and a rejection of conventional wisdom. While each movement has its unique characteristics and draws on different sources, they all reflect a human desire for understanding and meaning in the world around us. Throughout history, ancient mystery religions and myths of the gods and goddesses have served as fertile ground for the development of various philosophical and ideological movements. Four such movements, Hermeticism, Gnosticism, Marxism, and postmodernism, all have their roots in these ancient beliefs and practices. To begin with, Hermeticism can be traced back to the ancient Egyptian religion, which incorporated knowledge of magic, astrology, and alchemy. The god Thoth was believed to have given the Egyptians this knowledge, and Hermeticism evolved out of this tradition. Hermeticism emphasizes the power of the individual to transcend material reality and access the divine through spiritual practices like meditation and ritual. This belief in the potential of the individual to cultivate a deeper connection with the divine has influenced many other philosophical and religious movements throughout history, including Renaissance humanism and the New Age movement in the contemporary era. Similarly, Gnosticism, which emerged in the early Christian era, is rooted in ancient mythology and religion. Gnostics believed in a transcendent, unknowable God who created the world but was not directly responsible for its flaws and imperfections. This worldview was influenced by earlier myths of demiurges and archons who were responsible for the creation of the world and the shaping of human destiny. The idea of a hidden God or cosmic intelligence has continued to influence modern spiritual thought, including esoteric and mystical movements in contemporary culture. Marxism, too, can be traced back to ancient religious and economic systems. Marx himself compared his work to that of the ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus, who believed in the idea of the unity of opposites and the ever-present tension between the ruling elite and the oppressed masses. Marx's theory of history and society is based on a materialist conception of reality, which sees economic forces as the main driving force behind history. This belief in the primacy of material conditions over ideology and politics can be traced back to ancient Greek philosophy, which emphasized the importance of nature and physical reality as the basis of all human knowledge and understanding. Finally, postmodernism, which emerged in the late 20th century, is often seen as a reaction to the totalizing narratives of modernity, which sought to explain the world in terms of grand theories of science, progress, and reason. Postmodernism is rooted in a skepticism of these grand narratives and a recognition of the limitations of language, culture, and power in shaping our understanding of the world. This critical attitude towards dominant discourses and structures can be traced back to the ancient Greek sophists, who questioned the idea of absolute truth and the ability of language to accurately represent reality. The influence of ancient mystery religions and myths of the gods and goddesses can be found in a wide range of philosophical and ideological movements, from Hermeticism and Gnosticism to Marxism and postmodernism. These movements all share a belief in the power of the individual to access deeper truths and a recognition of the limitations of language, power, and culture in shaping our understanding of the world. By understanding these ancient roots, we can gain a deeper appreciation of the continued relevance of these ideas in modern thought and culture.
The ancient cultic roots of the ideas of Karl Marx.
Karl Marx is known as one of the most influential thinkers in the field of political and economic theory. However, many are unaware of the Hermetic and Gnostic roots that laid the foundation for his philosophical ideas. In order to fully understand how Marx's ideology was deeply influenced by these mystical traditions, it is important to explore the origins and key tenets of Hermeticism and Gnosticism. Hermeticism is a philosophical and religious tradition that emerged in ancient Egypt and Greece and then spread to the Roman Empire and eventually Europe during the Renaissance. It is centered around the teaching of the Hermetic corpus, a collection of texts that claim to contain the wisdom of the god Hermes Trismegistus. This wisdom is said to provide insights to the secrets of the universe, including the nature of the divine, the cosmos, and humanity's place within it. Hermeticism emphasizes the idea of as above, so below, meaning that the microcosm reflects the macrocosm and vice versa, and thus humans have a direct connection to the divine. Gnosticism, on the other hand, is a term that refers to a group of religious traditions that emerged in the Hellenistic period in the Eastern Mediterranean. The central belief of Gnostics is that there is a hidden knowledge that can save their souls from the material, imperfect world and lead them to the divine realm. Much like Hermeticism, Gnosticism emphasizes the idea of a spiritual nature that lies within all of us, and that the physical world is merely an illusion. Marx's worldview was deeply influenced by both Hermeticism and Gnosticism. He was introduced to these mystical traditions during his studies at the University of Berlin in the 1830s, where he encountered the works of Hegel, whose ideas were also heavily inspired by the Hermetic tradition. Marx rejected Hegel's idealism and instead turned towards materialism, but he retained many of the Hermetic and Gnostic themes. For instance, Marx's view of history is similar to the Hermetic belief that there is an underlying unity to all things that can be deciphered through careful observation and analysis. Marx believed that history was a series of class struggles that eventually led to the creation of a socialist society, which would be the ultimate expression of human freedom and equality. Similarly, Gnostic belief in a hidden knowledge that could save one's soul is echoed in Marx's belief that the working class, who possessed the knowledge of their own oppression, would rise up and overthrow the ruling class. In conclusion, Karl Marx's philosophical ideas were heavily influenced by the mystical traditions of Hermeticism and Gnosticism. His belief in a hidden unity to all things and in the power of the working class reflects themes found in both of these mystical traditions. Although Marx's ideas have been critiqued and challenged over the years, it is worth noting the complex intellectual roots that lay the foundation for his theories.
Hermeticism, Gnosticism, and the Chinese dynasties.
The ancient Chinese dynasties and the Chinese Communist Party have their roots in both Hermetic and Gnostic beliefs. These beliefs have deeply influenced Chinese thought, culture, and government. In this essay, I will explore the Hermetic and Gnostic roots of these entities and provide specific examples of how they have been manifested. Hermeticism is a philosophical and religious tradition that seeks to understand the nature of things through the study of natural laws and principles. The Hermetic teachings were developed in ancient Egypt and Greece and were later adopted by the alchemists of the Middle Ages. In China, the Hermetic teachings were incorporated into Taoism and later into Buddhism. The Hermetic roots of the ancient Chinese dynasties can be seen in their belief in the mandate of heaven. The mandate of heaven is the idea that the emperor of China was chosen by the gods to rule over the people. The emperor was seen as a divine figure, and his power was believed to come from the heavens. This idea of divine right to rule is a Hermetic concept, as it is based on the belief in natural laws and principles. The Gnostic roots of the ancient Chinese dynasties can be seen in their belief in the unity of all things. Gnosticism is a religious tradition that emphasizes the importance of spiritual knowledge and the unity of all things. In China, this idea was incorporated into Confucianism and Taoism. One example of the Gnostic roots of the ancient Chinese dynasties is the yin and yang principle. Yin and yang are opposing forces that are believed to be present in all things. The yin represents the dark, cold, and passive aspects of the universe, while the yang represents the light, warmth, and active aspects. The two forces are seen as complementary and essential to maintain balance in the universe. The Chinese Communist Party, on the other hand, has its roots in Marx's philosophy, which was heavily influenced by Gnostic ideas. Marx believed that history was a process of class struggle and that the ultimate goal of society was to achieve a state of communism, where all people lived in harmony. This idea of a utopian society is similar to the Gnostic idea of a unity of all things. One example of the Gnostic roots of the Chinese Communist Party is the idea of the collective. In communist societies, the collective is the entity that is seen as more important than the individual. This is because the collective is seen as being more important than the individual in realizing the ultimate goal of communism. This idea of the collective is similar to the Gnostic idea of the unity of all things. The Hermetic and Gnostic roots of the ancient Chinese dynasties and the Chinese Communist Party have heavily influenced the beliefs and practices of the Chinese people. These beliefs have been reflected in the various philosophies and religious traditions of China, as well as in the government policies and practices of the Chinese Communist Party. By understanding these roots, we can gain a better understanding of Chinese culture and history.
The cultic ancient roots of the Chinese Communist Party.
The Chinese Communist Party is one of the most powerful political parties in the world. It has been in power for over 7 decades, during which it has implemented policies that have significantly impacted the people of China and the rest of the world. The beliefs and policies of the CCP and its leader Xi Jinping have deep roots in both Hermetic and Gnostic thought, which have been blended with Chinese traditional beliefs. To understand the Hermetic and Gnostic roots of the CCP's beliefs and policies, one must first understand these two philosophical traditions. Hermeticism is an ancient mystical tradition that has its roots in ancient Egypt. It revolves around the concept of Hermes Trismegistus, a mythical figure who embodies the principles of alchemy, magic, and astrology. Gnosticism, on the other hand, is a more recent mystical tradition that emerged in the middle of the first millennium AD. It emphasizes knowledge and understanding as the path to salvation and holds that the world is ruled by evil forces. The CCP has been heavily influenced by these two traditions, particularly in the formulation of policies related to social engineering and control. The party's founder, Mao Zedong, was a strong believer in the power of alchemy and magic, which he saw as key to transforming society. In his view, the creation of a communist society was akin to the alchemist's quest to transform base metals into gold. The CCP's policies on education and culture are also influenced by Gnostic philosophy. In this tradition, salvation comes through knowledge and understanding. The CCP sees education as a tool for shaping society, and the curriculum is carefully designed to promote CCP ideology. In addition, the party has a strict control over the arts and media, which it sees as a means of shaping cultural values. Perhaps the most obvious manifestation of Hermetic and Gnostic beliefs in the CCP's policies is its focus on technology. and science. The party sees the development of modern technology as a way to transform society and bring about a new utopian world. Xi Jinping's China Dream policies are a good example of this. Under his leadership, China has invested heavily in technological innovation, particularly in artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and space exploration. It is clear that the beliefs and policies of the CCP and its leader Xi Jinping are deeply influenced by Hermetic and Gnostic thought. These philosophical traditions have been blended with traditional Chinese beliefs to produce a unique form of communism, one that relies heavily on technology, education, and culture to shape society. While the CCP has achieved many successes in promoting economic growth and stability, its policies have also resulted in significant human rights abuses and suppression of dissent.
The Hermetic semiotic encoding of intents by the Chinese Communist Party.
The Chinese Communist Party is known for its Hermetic and Gnostic approach to their tactics, policies, and beliefs. Through the use of symbols and codes, the CCP has established a unique system of communication that advances their political agendas while confounding opponents. The CCP's use of Hermetic and Gnostic semiotics is reflected in its revolutionary history, policies, and strategies. The CCP's revolutionary history is an excellent example of how the party has used Hermetic and Gnostic symbols to represent its beliefs. The party's symbol, consisting of a sickle and hammer, represents the union between the working class and the peasantry, a fundamental aspect of Marxist thought. This symbol is Hermetic because it is only easily decipherable by those who understand the ideological underpinnings of communism. Additionally, the party's flag, featuring a large 5-pointed star on a red background, is Gnostic in that the meaning behind the 5 stars is only known to party initiates in the Chinese government. The CCP also encodes its policies and strategies with Hermetic and Gnostic semiotics. For example, its 2 sessions meeting, comprised of the National People's Congress and the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, is cryptic in its messaging. The intent behind policies discussed in these sessions is known only to high-level CCP members, giving them an added advantage over potential opposition. Similarly, the Great Leap Forward of the late 1950s, a modernization effort that resulted in widespread famine, used Hermetic symbols such as steel and grain to represent industrial and agricultural production targets. While on its surface, the program appeared to be a noble effort to improve the standard of living for the Chinese people, it was instead a means to consolidate power for the CCP. Finally, the CCP's strategies are also heavily encoded in Hermetic and Gnostic symbols. For example, the 3 warfares, cyber, public opinion, and legal warfare, is an approach to modern warfare that the CCP believes will give them an advantage over their technologically superior opponents. This strategy uses Hermetic and Gnostic symbols to manipulate public opinion, destabilize societies, and achieve overall dominance. The CCP's use of Hermetic and Gnostic semiotics represents its view of the world as one that necessitates a certain level of obfuscation and secrecy. From the symbols found in its revolutionary history to the encoded meaning behind the 2 sessions meeting, the CCP uses these tactics to further its political agenda and maintain power. Despite its inherent complexities, the system has proven to be incredibly effective at advancing its goals and will likely continue to do so in the future. The Chinese Communist Party has a unique blend of Marxist-Leninist ideology and Chinese cultural traditions, including Taoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism. However, in recent years, there have been indications that the CCP has also incorporated Hermetic and Gnostic beliefs into its worldview and policies. This essay will explain how the CCP has encoded specific Hermetic and Gnostic beliefs into their worldview and policies with specific examples. Hermeticism is a set of esoteric beliefs that originated in ancient Egypt and became popular in Europe during the Renaissance. It emphasizes the idea that there is a hidden knowledge that can be acquired through contemplation, meditation, and ritual. Gnosticism, on the other hand, is a set of teachings that originated in the early Christian era and emphasize the importance of direct personal knowledge of the divine through introspection and mystical experience. These 2 beliefs are not commonly associated with Chinese culture, but the CCP has incorporated them into their ideology in some surprising ways. One example of how the CCP has incorporated Hermetic beliefs is through its use of Chinese traditional medicine. Traditional Chinese medicine is based on the idea that the human body is a microcosm of the universe and that the various organs and systems are connected to the natural elements of the world. This belief has a Hermetic element to it, suggesting that there is a hidden connection between the body and the universe that can be unlocked through special knowledge. Another example of Hermetic influence is the CCP's interest in astrology and Feng Shui. These practices are based on the idea that the placement of objects and structures influences the flow of energy in the environment, thereby affecting the well-being of people living in that space. By studying the stars and the elements, the CCP believes it may be able to harness this energy to gain political power or influence decision-making. The CCP's Gnostic beliefs are also apparent in its policies and practices. One way in which Gnostic beliefs show up is in the party's emphasis on self-reliance and the importance of individual experience. This emphasis on personal experience can be seen in the way that the CCP emphasizes experience-based training for its officials and in the learning from practice movement that prioritizes hands-on experience over abstract knowledge. Another example of Gnostic influence is the CCP's emphasis on inner strength and self-cultivation. The party believes that a strong state in society must be built on a foundation of strong individuals who are self-disciplined and possess strong moral character. This belief can be seen in the party's effort to promote traditional values and in the Red Culture movement, which seeks to cultivate a sense of national pride and identity through the study of traditional Chinese culture. It is important to note, however, that the CCP's adoption of Hermetic and Gnostic beliefs is selective and sometimes contradictory. For example, while the party emphasizes the importance of self-cultivation and the inner life, it is also committed to a program of strict political control that involves surveillance, censorship, and repression of dissent. Furthermore, while the party encourages traditional values, it also embraces a high-tech, futuristic vision of China in which technology and innovation play a major role. The incorporation of Hermetic and Gnostic beliefs into the CCP's ideology is an interesting and surprising development in Chinese politics. While these beliefs are not traditionally Chinese, they have been adapted and encoded to fit within the party's larger worldview and policy goals. Examples such as the use of traditional Chinese medicine and the emphasis on inner strength and self-cultivation demonstrate how these beliefs have been woven into party ideology in unique and sometimes contradictory ways.
How these ancient religious and philosophical traditions have influenced ideologies and political movements.
The influence of ancient Egyptian and Babylonian roots on Hermeticism and Gnosticism is a significant aspect of the development of modern philosophy and political thought. Hermeticism, a religious and philosophical tradition that originated in Egypt during the Hellenistic period, was focused on the study of the natural world, spiritual development, and the relationship between humans and the divine. Gnosticism, on the other hand, was a religious movement that emerged in the Middle East during the 1st century CE and was based on the idea that true knowledge of the divine was necessary for salvation. The influence of these ancient traditions can be traced in Machiavellian politics and governance, Hegelian philosophy, Marxism, and postmodern thought. The Machiavellian view of politics as a struggle for power and control draws heavily on Hermetic ideas about power and the relationship between humans and the divine. Similarly, Hegelian philosophy, with its emphasis on dialectical thinking and historical progress, owes much to the Gnostic idea of the eternal struggle between good and evil. The Marxist tradition, with its focus on class struggle and the overthrow of capitalism, was also influenced by these ancient traditions. Both Hermeticism and Gnosticism emphasize the importance of seeking knowledge and wisdom as a means of achieving spiritual transformation and enlightenment. For Marx, the struggle between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat was a necessary step in the evolution of human society towards a utopian future. In postmodern thought, the influence of these traditions can be seen in the embrace of relativism and the rejection of grand narratives. The Hermetic belief in the importance of individual spiritual transformation and the Gnostic emphasis on the existence of secret knowledge that is only available to a select few were antecedents to the postmodern emphasis on subjective experience and multiple perspectives. These ancient traditions have also influenced contemporary movements focused on diversity, equality, and inclusion, such as critical race theory. For example, the Gnostic idea of the existence of a hidden knowledge or consciousness that could only be accessed by the initiated has been used to explore the ways in which power and privilege are distributed within society, and how they impact marginalized groups. Similarly, the Hermetic focus on spiritual transformation has been used to argue that social change requires not only political action but also a deeper transformation of consciousness. The influence of the ancient Egyptian and Babylonian traditions on Hermeticism and Gnosticism has had a profound impact on modern philosophy and political thought. From Machiavellian politics and Hegelian philosophy to Marxism, postmodernism, and contemporary movements focus on diversity and inclusion. These traditions continue to shape the way we think about power, knowledge, and the relationship between humans and the divine.
How these ideologies and philosophies have sought to influence and disrupt traditional Judeo-Christian worldviews.
For centuries, the Judeo-Christian tradition has been the dominant religious and philosophical worldview in the Western world. However, in recent times, this worldview has been disrupted and infiltrated by various other schools of thought including Hermeticism, Gnosticism, Marxism, and postmodern philosophy. These alternative worldviews challenge traditional Judeo-Christian beliefs and doctrines and offer a new way of thinking and understanding the world. Hermeticism is a school of thought that originated in ancient Egypt and Greece and was popularized during the Renaissance. It emphasizes the idea that the world is a reflection of the divine and that knowledge of this divine reality can be obtained through spiritual practices and the study of sacred texts. Hermeticism challenges traditional Judeo-Christian beliefs regarding the nature of God and creation. Gnosticism is another school of thought that emerged in the 1st century AD. This worldview emphasizes the idea that the material world is inherently flawed and that salvation can only be obtained through secret knowledge of the divine. Gnosticism challenges traditional Judeo-Christian beliefs regarding the relationship between God and the physical world. Marxism is a political and economic philosophy that emerged in the 19th century. It argues that social and economic inequality is caused by the exploitation of the working class by the ruling class. Marxism challenges traditional Judeo-Christian beliefs regarding the role of capitalism and private property in society. Postmodern philosophy is a broad school of thought that emerged in the 20th century. It challenges traditional Judeo-Christian beliefs regarding the nature of truth and knowledge. Postmodernists argue that truth is subjective and that all claims to objective knowledge are culturally and socially constructed. These alternative worldviews have had a significant impact on traditional Judeo-Christian beliefs, doctrines, and worldviews. For example, many modern Christians have embraced Hermeticism and Gnosticism and have integrated elements of these worldviews into their religious practices. Similarly, Marx's critiques of capitalism have led many Christians to reevaluate their views on private property and economic inequality. Moreover, postmodern philosophy has challenged traditional Christian claims to absolute truth and has led to a renewed emphasis on the subjective nature of religious experience. This has led many Christians to adopt a more inclusive and tolerant approach to other worldviews and religious traditions. In conclusion, the infiltration and disruption of traditional Judeo-Christian beliefs by Hermeticism, Gnosticism, Marxism, and postmodern philosophy have had a significant impact on the way many Christians think about the world. While this has led to new ways of understanding the divine and the nature of reality, it has also led to tension and conflict within the Christian community between traditionalists and those who embrace these alternative worldviews.
The Chinese Communist Party justifies its persecution of Judeo-Christian beliefs in line with its ancient cultic philosophical roots.
Throughout its history, the Chinese Communist Party has viewed Judeo-Christian traditional beliefs, doctrines, and faith as a threat to its power. From Mao Zedong's rise to power in 1949 to the present day, the CCP has sought to control and suppress any religious activity that could potentially challenge its authority. In this essay, we will examine the reasons behind the CCP's hostility towards Judeo-Christian beliefs and explore specific examples of how this hostility has manifested itself. One of the primary reasons the CCP sees Judeo-Christian beliefs as a threat is because they are perceived as foreign influences that could undermine Chinese cultural and political values. The CCP has always been deeply invested in promoting an ideology of Chinese exceptionalism, wherein China is presented as a unique and superior civilization. The influx of Western religious beliefs is seen as a challenge to this view, as it suggests that Chinese culture is incomplete or inadequate without foreign elements. This perception has deep roots in China's historical experience of Western imperialism and colonialism, and it continues to shape the CCP's attitude towards foreign religious influences. The CCP's hostility towards Judeo-Christian beliefs is also driven by its ideological commitment to secularism. Communism, by definition, seeks to abolish religion as a means of achieving a society free from exploitation and oppression. The Chinese government, therefore, sees religion as a disturbing factor that distracts people from the party's political goals. Furthermore, the CCP views Christianity and other religious faiths as promoting individualism, which is often seen as a threat to the collective ideals of the party. In terms of specific examples, the CCP's crackdown on Christianity in the country is one of the most notable. Over the past few years, the CCP has been tightening its grip on religious activity, which has led to large-scale demolitions of churches, arrests of religious leaders, and the banning of Christian practices. The government's justification for these actions is that they are necessary to maintain social stability and prevent the spread of extremism. However, human rights groups have argued that these crackdowns are merely a way for the CCP to assert its authority over religious minorities. Another example of the CCP's hostility towards Judeo-Christian beliefs is its treatment of the Uyghur Muslim minority in Xinjiang province. Many Christian groups have spoken out against the brutal crackdown on the Uyghur population, which includes forced re-education, internment, and torture. The CCP has justified these actions as necessary to combat terrorism and separatism, but again, international observers have called out these claims as flimsy justifications for human rights abuses. The Chinese Communist Party's attitude towards Judeo-Christian beliefs is one of deep-seated suspicion and hostility. The party sees these beliefs as foreign influences that could challenge the ideological foundations of communist rule or promote individualism that is detrimental to the collective ideals of the party. The examples of the crackdown on Christianity and treatment of the Uyghur minority in Xinjiang are reminders of the dire consequences of the CCP's policies towards religious belief. They see ideas of objective truth, notions of freedom, liberty, human rights, and the existence of God as adversarial to their hegemony and control. The Chinese Communist Party has a long history of utilizing Marxist and postmodern philosophy to challenge and undermine American power and Western beliefs and values. By mixing Marxist ideology with postmodern critical theory, the CCP can promote a narrative that questions the authenticity and legitimacy of Western values and social institutions. First and foremost, the CCP uses Marxist ideology to critique and challenge the Western capitalist system. They argue that capitalism is a system that inherently exploits the working class, and that the accumulation of wealth by a few individuals undermines the ideals of true democracy and equality. The CCP also utilizes postmodern critical theory, which is rooted in skepticism toward modern Enlightenment ideas such as reason, truth, and objective reality. This allows the CCP to question the legitimacy of Western narratives and ideologies, such as democracy and human rights, which they argue are merely Western constructs that do not necessarily apply to their society. For example, the CCP has used Marxist and postmodern philosophy to criticize Western intervention in developing countries. They argue that Western countries, primarily the United States, use these interventions as a way to create new markets for their own economic interests, rather than to genuinely help people in these countries. This narrative allows the CCP to portray themselves as a genuine alternative to the Western model of governance. Similarly, the CCP has utilized both Marxist and postmodern philosophy to challenge the notion of universal human rights. They argue that universal human rights are a Western construct that is not applicable to China's unique historical and cultural context. This allows the CCP to justify their own human rights abuses by claiming that they are acting in accordance with Chinese values rather than Western ones. The CCP has effectively used a mixture of Marxist and postmodern philosophy to challenge and undermine American power and Western beliefs and values. By undermining the legitimacy and authenticity of Western narratives and ideologies, they are able to promote their own alternative vision of governance and justify their own human rights abuses. It is important for Western governments and citizens to understand the philosophical tools being employed by the CCP in their attempts to challenge Western influence and protect their own interests. Back home in China, the Chinese Communist Party has long been criticized for its questionable stance on human rights and personal freedoms. Contrary to the liberal principles that underpin many Western democracies, the CCP views these concepts as directly adversarial to their power. The party's strict control over the citizenry and suppression of dissent serves as proof of their firm belief that these political and civil liberties are perceived as threats to their regime. One of the most salient examples of the CCP's suppression of human rights and personal freedoms can be seen in their treatment of Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang province. The CCP has effectively created a surveillance state that monitors every aspect of the lives of the Uyghur population, including their facial expressions, internet searches, telephone conversations, and even movements. Additionally, the CCP has established concentration camps where Uyghurs are subjected to forced political and ideological re-education, brutal treatment, and even torture. The CCP sees any expression of Islam, Uyghur culture, or Uyghur nationalism as a threat to its power and has taken extreme measures to suppress these factors. Another example of the CCP's disregard for human rights and personal freedoms can be seen in the case of the pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong. The protests, which began in 2019, were sparked by a proposed extradition bill that many feared would allow China to extradite Hong Kong citizens to the mainland, where they would be subject to the draconian legal system. In response to the protests, the CCP instituted a national security law that criminalizes sedition, subversion, and secession, effectively ending freedom of speech and assembly. Under this law, scores of pro-democracy activists and politicians have been arrested, and many have fled Hong Kong, fearing for their safety. The CCP's suppression of human rights and personal freedoms goes beyond but is not limited to Uyghurs and Hong Kong protesters. Internet censorship, the suppression of free speech, repression of workers' rights, and the stifling of civil society organizations are all tactics the CCP has used to maintain power. By controlling each aspect of the lives of Chinese citizens, the CCP seeks to exert absolute authority over the country, leaving no room for dissents or opposers. Human rights and personal freedoms in China have been under threat for decades. The CCP views these liberties as potentially endangering their power, and as such, they have taken extreme measures to suppress them. The treatment of Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang province and the Hong Kong pro-democracy protests serve as examples of the CCP's disregard for human rights and personal freedoms. The suppression of these rights is a sad reality for millions of people in China, and it remains a stain on the CCP's record of governance. The Chinese Communist Party has long maintained a hostile view towards human rights and personal freedoms in nations around the world, particularly in the United States of America. From the CCP's perspective, such rights and freedoms are seen as a threat to their power, both domestically and in their pursuit of global hegemony. To begin with, the CCP's views on human rights and personal freedoms can be traced back to their origins. Founded in 1921 by Marxist intellectuals, the CCP sought to overthrow the ruling nationalist government and establish a socialist society based on Marxist principles. From the beginning, the party emphasized the collective over individual rights, arguing that individual freedoms must be subordinated to the needs of the state and the broader social good. This perspective is evident in the CCP's approach to human rights and personal freedoms, which are seen as subordinate to the goals of the state. In America and other nations, the CCP views human rights and personal freedoms as a tool of American hegemony. The party sees the promotion of these ideals as a means of spreading American influence and undermining the CCP's legitimacy, as well as that of other authoritarian regimes. According to the CCP, America and other Western nations use human rights and personal freedoms as a pretext for interfering in the domestic affairs of other countries in order to advance their own interests. One example of this is the CCP's response to the protests in Hong Kong in 2019. As protesters took to the streets to demand greater democracy and individual freedoms, the CCP saw this as a direct challenge to their power. Chinese officials accused the United States of fomenting unrest in Hong Kong and claimed that American support for the protesters aimed to undermine the CCP and establish hegemony in the region. The party responded with a crackdown on dissent in Hong Kong and tightened control over media and civil society across China. Another example of the CCP's adversarial view of human rights and personal freedoms is their treatment of ethnic and religious minorities. In Xinjiang province, the Chinese government has implemented a mass detention and surveillance program targeting Uyghur Muslims, as well as members of other minority groups. The CCP claims that this is necessary to combat terrorism and separatism, but human rights organizations have documented widespread abuses, including torture, forced labor, and cultural suppression. From the CCP's perspective, such measures are necessary to maintain social stability and prevent the emergence of threats to their rule. In summary, the CCP views human rights and personal freedoms in America and other nations around the world as adversarial to their power and pursuit of global hegemony. The party sees such values as a tool of Western imperialism and argues that they must be subordinated to the broader goals of the state. Examples including the crackdown in Hong Kong and the treatment of ethnic and religious minorities in Xinjiang illustrate the CCP's willingness to prioritize state interests over individual rights and freedoms.
How the CCP leverages critical race theory, identity politics, and other corrosive ideologies to sow chaos in America.
It is no secret that the Chinese Communist Party has been actively seeking ways to influence and manipulate the opinions and beliefs of Americans in order to sow division and promote chaos. As part of this effort, the CCP has recently begun leveraging various theories and philosophies, including critical race theory and identity politics, to target Americans in a bid to further their own agenda and undermine American democracy. Critical race theory, for example, is an academic framework that examines how race and racism intersect with other forms of social inequality. It suggests that race is not just a biological category, but also a product of social, cultural, and political forces. The CCP's embrace of this theory is noteworthy because it has no official policy of acknowledging that ethnic groups exist within China, let alone acknowledging systematic discrimination against them, such as the persecution of the Uyghur community. The CCP, as news sources have reported, has been pushing critical race theory through its various propaganda machines, such as state-run media and think tanks. One such think tank, the Beijing Greenfield Institute, has reportedly published a study that argues that critical race theory is a powerful tool to weaken American society from within. The report suggests that the CCP should promote this theory in the United States to encourage a lack of national cohesion and a proliferation of racial resentment. By promoting these ideas, the CCP hopes to create social and political chaos in the U.S., which will ultimately work in its favor. Similarly, the CCP has also been leveraging identity politics, which focuses on how different social groups, particularly minorities and marginalized communities, are characterized and treated in society. By using identity politics, the CCP aims to create and exploit divisions between different groups in the U.S., pitting them against each other in a bid to weaken the country. One way the CCP has attempted to do this is by using identity politics to provide financial support to various organizations in the United States. According to news reports, the CCP has been funneling money to groups such as the NAACP in order to sow dissent and foment social unrest. By promoting identity politics and other narratives that emphasize divisions rather than unity, the CCP seeks to weaken the fabric of American society and ultimately advance its own interests. In conclusion, the CCP's use of critical race theory, identity politics, and other philosophies and narratives to target Americans and sow division and chaos in the U.S. is a troubling development that is of concern to many people. By promoting these narratives and theories, the CCP hopes to undermine American democracy, weaken the country, and ultimately advance its own interests. Americans must remain vigilant and be aware of these tactics in order to protect the country's democracy and values.
How the roots of Christian liberation theology are connected to Hermeticism, Gnosticism, Marxism, and postmodern philosophy.
Christian liberation theology is a theological framework that emerged in the late 1960s and 1970s in Latin America. This theological movement emphasized the idea that Christianity is not only a religion but also a radical call to social justice. The roots of Christian liberation theology can be traced back to a number of intellectual and philosophical traditions, including Hermeticism, Gnosticism, Marxism, and postmodern philosophy. Hermeticism is a set of esoteric beliefs and practices that originated in ancient Greece and Egypt. It emphasizes the unity of all things and the transcendence of the individual self. One of the central concepts of Hermeticism is the idea that human beings can achieve spiritual enlightenment and union with the divine through knowledge and understanding. This concept is reflected in the emphasis on education and reflection in Christian liberation theology. Gnosticism is a set of religious beliefs and practices that emerged in the years following the death of Jesus Christ in the Middle East. It emphasizes the importance of gnosis or knowledge, particularly knowledge of the true nature of God and the universe. This concept is reflected in the Christian liberation theology's emphasis on the need for a deep understanding of the social, economic, and political factors that shape the lives of people. Marxism is a political and economic theory developed by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels in the mid-19th century. It emphasizes the importance of social and economic transformation to overcome the oppressive forces of capitalism. This concept is reflected in the Christian liberation theology's emphasis on the need for a radical transformation of social, economic, and political structures to liberate the oppressed. Postmodern philosophy is a theoretical framework that emerged in the late 20th century and is characterized by the rejection of grand narratives and the emphasis on the subjective experience of reality. This concept is reflected in the Christian liberation theology's emphasis on the subjective experience of social oppression. The focus is on the understanding of the individual's experience of oppression rather than a broader societal perspective. The roots of Christian liberation theology have many connections to Hermeticism, Gnosticism, Marxism, and postmodern philosophy. For example, the emphasis on education, reflection, and the pursuit of knowledge in Hermeticism and Gnosticism is reflected in Christian liberation theology's focus on the importance of understanding social, economic, and political structures. Similarly, the emphasis on social and economic transformation in Marxism is reflected in the Christian liberation theology's call for radical transformation of oppressive structures. And the emphasis on subjective experience in postmodern philosophy is reflected in the attention given to individual experiences of oppression. The roots of Christian liberation theology are connected to Hermeticism, Gnosticism, Marxism, and postmodern philosophy through various concepts such as education, transformation, and subjective experience. These connections highlight the importance of understanding the intellectual and philosophical traditions that have shaped this theological movement. This movement has been poisoned by hostile actors such as China who have sought to influence it to sow discord along Christians while attempting to subtly move factions into a socialist and communist power base. The Beijing seeks to turn discredit by using Christianity against Christianity, and Americans against Americans in order to mitigate its influence on the culture. Furthermore, they leverage many different strategies and tactics to corrupt Christianity by infiltrating organizations, institutions, and thought leaders in hopes of amplifying a corrupting influence within Christianity itself. They also are active in doing this in the broader society in an attempt to first undermine and then take over the seven spheres of society. The ancient serpent, also called the dragon, and Satanism has been very successful in its subtlety and destructiveness. It has been remarkably successful in gaining the upper hand for a time, for it is the most cunning of all the beasts of the field. That field is now a battlefield. It should be quite clear now the roots and the offspring of the contagion infecting our society. Likewise, it should also be obvious the great challenge we have to pushing back the darkness and defeating it. The dragon and those peoples, places, and things which have adopted its nature are formidable. Many have no idea how they have been compromised and turned into proxies against others in their own best interests. It is a war. The nature of war is deception. Many have been deceived. In this war there are no civilians. In this way there are but three kinds of people: soldiers, prisoners, and casualties. We cannot sit idle in this war and think that it will not have deep and lasting impacts on ourselves, our progeny, and the future of generations of people here and around the world. As for people, so too for the nation and nation.